My daughter Vanessa stood pounding on my front door, her voice sharp enough to cut through the evening fog. "You've ruined our future, Mom," she screamed. She meant the house, the money, the life she thought she'd claimed. Inside, I sat, with my coffee, the mug warm against my palms, watching police lights flicker across my tulip beds. Their son, my sweet Ethan, was asleep upstairs, oblivious to the chaos. They'd used my name, my face, to fundraise for his future, but that campaign, poof, vanished, exposed, deleted. This is the story of how I stopped being their burden and became their wake-up call. Before we dive in, I've got to ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It started with a betrayal so quiet, I almost missed it. I was 62, a retired English teacher with a bad knee and a garden full of tulips, waiting in a sterile hospital room for a surgery I dreaded for months. Vanessa promised she'd be there, holding my hand. Derek, her husband, swore he'd drive me home. I trusted them. I'd raised Vanessa in that little Seattle house, read her poetry at bedtime, wiped her tears. But that day, as the clock ticked and my knee throbbed, my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. They weren't coming. They were on a cruise, sipping cocktails under Alaskan stars, while I faced the scalpel alone. That wasn't the worst part. What they did next made me realize they weren't just careless, they were calculating, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite my story. I'm Ellie Whitaker, 62, and if you saw me on the street, you'd probably notice my silver hair, cropped short, or the way I leaned slightly on my left leg since the knee surgery I used to teach high school English, filling chalkboards with Shakespeare and Frost, coaxing teenagers to find their own voices in poetry. Now, retired, I spend my days in a small Seattle house, tending tulips and rereading old books. My cardigans are always blue, my coffee always black, and my heart, well, it's been through a lot, but it's still beating. I live alone, but not entirely. There's Vanessa, my only daughter, 35, a marketing whiz with a smile that could sell ice to a glacier. She's ambitious, always planning 3 steps ahead, her phone buzzing with emails even at dinner. Her husband, Derek, 37, manages a bank branch downtown. He's practical, the kind of man who checks his watch mid-conversation. They have Ethan, my grandson, 5 years old, with curls that bounce when he runs and a laugh that makes my chest ache with love. I'd read him poems on my porch, his tiny fingers tracing the words, and for a while, I thought that was enough to keep us close. The house I live in, with its creaky floors and tulip beds, is where I raised Vanessa. It's modest, but mine, paid, off with years of lesson plans and late-night grading. After I fell down the stairs last year, shattering my knee, I needed help, crutches, rides, someone to carry the grocery bags. Vanessa and Derek stepped in, promising to take care of me. I trusted them, grateful for their help, even when Vanessa started organizing my bills or Derek offered to streamline my accounts. They said it was temporary, just until I could walk without pain. But something felt off, like a poem with a missing line. I didn't see it then, but they weren't just helping me. They were rewriting my life, line by line, and I was about to find out how far they'd go. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, the kind of place where time drags its feet. I sat on the exam table, my bad knee stiff under the paper gown, waiting for Vanessa or Derek to show up. It was the day of my knee surgery, a big one, the kind that makes you sign forms about risks and recovery. I'd reminded them a week ago, circled it on the kitchen calendar in red ink. Vanessa had hugged me, said, "Mom, we've got you." Derek nodded, jingling his car keys. I believed them. I always did. But the clock ticked past 8, then 9. The nurse popped in, her smile tight. Your ride's coming soon, right? I nodded, clutching my phone like it might explain everything. Then it buzzed, a text from Vanessa. My stomach sank before I even read it. So sorry, Mom. Total mix-up. We're on a cruise in Alaska. Thought it was just a checkup. You'll be fine, right? A photo followed. Vanessa in a sundress, Derek with a cocktail, the icy fjords sparkling behind them. I stared at their sunlit smiles, my hands trembling. I wasn't fine. I was alone, facing surgery, with no one to hold my hand or drive me home. They booked a lift. The driver was quiet, his car smelling of Pine Air freshener. I sat in the back, my knee throbbing, my heart heavier than the brace they'd strap on later. The surgery went okay, but the doctor's words lingered. Recovery's tough without support. You'll need help. I nodded, thinking of Vanessa's hug, Derek's keys. But when I got home, the house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. A few days later, I checked the mailbox, hobbling on crutches. Bills, flyers, and an envelope addressed to Derek Coleman at my address. Odd. I tucked it under the coffee pot Vanessa had bought me, its sleek chrome out of place in my cozy kitchen. Then I noticed more. My bank statement forwarded to their house. My credit card, the one Derek said he'd hold for safekeeping, was missing from my wallet. I'd handed it over during a grocery run when Vanessa waved it off, saying, "We'll handle the Medicare stuff, Mom. You rest." I opened. My laptop, my fingers clumsy on the keys. The bank's website took forever to load, but when it did, my breath caught. Vanessa's name was listed as a joint account holder on my savings, added 2 months ago. A few withdrawals stood out. $200 here, $500 there, labeled household expenses. I didn't live in their household. My pulse raced, not from the pain meds, but from a truth I wasn't ready to face. Then came the email. It was from Vanessa. Subject, your care plan. I clicked, expecting a get well note. Instead, it was a PDF, cold and formal, like something from a lawyer's office. Eleanor Whitaker, Q3 Care Review. Bullet points listed my life like a budget, $50 weekly grocery limit, transportation via Lyft, managed by Derek, medical decisions overseen by Vanessa Coleman. At the bottom, their signatures. No line for mine. It wasn't a plan. It was a cage. I sat back, the chair creaking under me. The tulips outside my window swayed in the Seattle drizzle, their petals bruised but still standing. I taught Vanessa to love those flowers, to see beauty in small things. Now she was boxing me up piece by piece, like I was a problem to solve. I wanted to call her to ask why, but my throat tightened. Instead, I dialed Ruth, my older sister, the one person who'd always listened. "Ruth," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think something's wrong with Vanessa and Derek." She didn't interrupt, just let me spill it all. The cruise, the bank account, the care plan that felt like a contract. I told her about Ethan, how I'd spent hours teaching him poems, how I'd thought that love would keep us tethered. "Maybe they're just overwhelmed," I said, almost convincing myself. "Maybe I'm reading this wrong." Ruth's voice was steady, like a lighthouse in fog. "Ellie, is this help, or is it control dressed up as kindness?" That question hit me like a cold wave. I looked at the care plan again, the words blurring through tears. $50 for groceries. Derek deciding my doctor visits. Vanessa's name on my savings. This wasn't love. It was theft, slow and deliberate. I hobbled to my desk where a stack of old poetry books sat, their spines worn from years of teaching. One caught my eye, a gift from my late husband Tom, with a note inside. "Ellie, you're stronger than you know." I traced his handwriting, my fingers shaking. I'd raised Vanessa alone after Tom passed, poured every ounce of myself into her. I'd thought family meant trust, but now, staring at that care plan, I realized trust could be a trap. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd stay quiet, grateful for their help. They underestimated the wrong woman. I wasn't just a retired teacher with a bad knee. I was Ellie Whitaker, and I was about to rewrite the ending they'd planned for me. The next morning, my knee ached worse than usual, but I forced myself to the mailbox again, crutches clicking on the porch. Another envelope, this time a bank notice, addressed to Vanessa at my house. I tore it open, my hands unsteady. It was a confirmation. My savings account now listed Derek as a beneficiary for estate planning purposes. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even been asked. My chest tightened, not from pain, but from the weight of what this meant. They weren't just managing my life, they were planning for my absence. I went back inside, the house too still, the hum of the fridge louder than it should have been. On the kitchen counter, I found a note Vanessa had left last month. "Mom, let us handle the bills. You focus on healing." I thought it was sweet, a daughter looking out for me. Now it felt like a script, one they'd written to keep me small. I rummaged through a drawer looking for my checkbook and found it missing. Instead, there was a stack of unopened mail tucked away like a secret. Utility bills, a credit card statement, even a notice from my insurance, all marked forwarded or addressed to Derek. I called Vanessa that afternoon, my voice calmer than I felt. "Where's my checkbook?" I asked. She laughed, bright and breezy, like I'd asked about the weather. "Oh, Mom, I borrowed it for some errands. You weren't writing checks with that knee, right? I'll bring it back tomorrow." Her tone sweetened, syrupy. "We're just trying to make things easier. You know how busy we are with Ethan." I gripped the phone tighter. "You didn't ask," I said. There was a pause, then a quick, "Love you, gotta run." The line went dead. That evening, I sat at my dining table, the one where I'd helped Vanessa with her high school essays, where I'd taught Ethan to color inside the lines. I opened my laptop again, this time to check my email. Another message from Vanessa sent while I was still in the hospital. "Updated financial plan," it read. I clicked, dreading what I'd find. It was another document, this one listing my monthly allowance, $300 for all expenses, managed through Derek's app. There was a line about property management, suggesting my house be evaluated for future use. My house, the one I'd paid for with years of teaching, where I'd raised Vanessa, where tulips bloomed every spring. They were already measuring it for their own plans. I felt like I was reading someone else's life, not mine. My knee throbbed, but the real pain was deeper, a betrayal that cut through years of love. I thought of Ethan, his small hand in mine as we read The Wind. In the Willows, I'd given them everything, time, love, trust, and they'd turned me into a line item, a problem to streamline. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew Vanessa would just laugh it off, and Derek would talk in circles. Instead, I picked up the phone again and called Ruth. Her voice was warm like a blanket on a cold day. "Ellie, what's going on?" I told her everything. The cruise, the bank account, the care plan, the missing checkbook. My voice broke when I got to the house. "They're acting like I'm already gone, Ruth. Like I'm a burden they're tying up in a neat bow." Waited for her to tell me I was overreacting, that Vanessa was just stressed, that Derek meant well. She didn't. "Ellie," she said, her words careful but firm, "this isn't care. This is control, wrapped in a pretty package. You're not a burden. You're their mother." Her words landed like a spark in dry grass. I looked out at my garden, the tulips bent under the rain but still rooted deep. I'd taught Vanessa to stand tall, to fight for what mattered. Now I had to do the same. They thought I'd stay quiet, that a retired teacher with a bad knee wouldn't push back. They didn't know me at all. I wasn't just Ellie, the mom who read bedtime stories. I was Ellie Whitaker, and I was done letting them write my story. Ruth's words echoed in my head for days. Control, not care. I couldn't unsee it now. Every forwarded bill, every borrowed checkbook, every line in that care plan was a thread in a net they'd woven around me. I was 62, with a knee that barely bent, but I wasn't done living, not by a long shot. I wasn't going to let Vanessa and Derek write my ending. I started with a phone call to Clara Nguyen, a lawyer Ruth knew from her book club. Clara's office was in downtown Seattle, all glass and polished wood, but her voice was kind, like she'd seen stories like mine before. I brought a folder, bank statements, that chilling care plan, the beneficiary notice I'd never signed. They're planning for me to be gone, I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. Clara nodded, flipping through the pages. You're not trapped, Ellie. Not if you act now. We got to work. First, we revoked the power of attorney Vanessa had slipped into my hands post-surgery, when I was too groggy to read the fine print. Then we froze my accounts, cutting off their access. Clara suggested a living trust for my house, the one I'd raised Vanessa in, with its tulip beds and creaky porch. It keeps control in your hands, she said. No one can touch it unless you say so. I nodded, but a bigger idea was brewing, one I didn't share yet. It felt like a poem taking shape, each line sharper than the last. I didn't confront. Vanessa and Derek right away. I wanted everything in place first. A week later, Clara called me to a meeting at her office. Bring them, she said. Let's make this clear. I texted Vanessa, keeping it short. We need to talk. Clara's office Friday, 10 a.m. Vanessa replied with a breezy, Sure, Mom. Hope you're feeling better. I didn't respond. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, like a drum before a march. They walked into Clara's office, like they owned the place. Vanessa wore a pastel blazer, her smile practiced, like she was pitching a client. Derek adjusted his tie, his eyes scanning the room. I sat across from them, Ruth by my side, her silence solid as stone. Clara started, her voice calm but unyielding. We're here to discuss Ellie's finances and legal authority. Effective. Immediately, all prior agreements are revoked. Vanessa's smile faltered. Mom, what's this about? We've been helping you. Her voice cracked just enough to sound hurt. I slid a folder across the table, printouts of bank withdrawals. In $200 for a cruise deposit, $300 for a leather couch, $150 for a spa day, all from my account. This is help? I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. Those were for shared expenses. You know how tight things are with Ethan's school fees. I didn't blink. I don't live in your house, Vanessa, and I didn't authorize a single dime. Clara leaned in. We've documented 16 unauthorized transactions in the last 3 months. This isn't a misunderstanding. Vanessa dropped the act, her eyes narrowing. You're making us sound like thieves. We're your family, Mom. We're under so much pressure. Pressure to plan my funeral? I asked. Ruth squeezed my hand under the table. I pulled out another document, the care plan they'd emailed, with its $50 grocery limit and Derek's name as my medical proxy. You wrote this while I was in surgery. You left me alone on a cruise and planned my life without asking. The room went still. Derek finally spoke, his voice flat. You're blowing this out of proportion, Ellie. We were just organizing things. I stood, my knee protesting but holding me up. You organized me out of my own life. That stops now. Clara handed them the revocation papers, notarized, final. Vanessa's face twisted. You'll regret this, Mom. You're pushing us away when we need each other. I met her eyes, the ones I'd kissed goodnight for years. If family means control, I'll take freedom instead. I walked out, Ruth behind me, and didn't look back. That wasn't the twist. The real twist came later, and it was bigger than they could have imagined. I didn't just protect my house, I gave it away. Not to Vanessa, not to Derek, but to a charity for retired teachers, people like me who'd spent their lives giving. Clara helped me set up the trust, quiet and airtight. The house, my tulip beds, the porch where I'd read to Ethan, it would become a community space, a place for teachers to gather, to heal. I signed the papers with a pen Tom had given me, each stroke feeling like a reclamation. Then I did something Vanessa never saw coming. I recorded a video, just me, sitting at my dining table with a cup of coffee and a stack of evidence. I spoke calmly, like I was teaching a class. If you're watching this, you're a friend or neighbor of Vanessa. And Derek, you deserve to know the truth. I laid it all out. The cruise, the withdrawals, the care plan, the way they'd used my name to fundraise for Ethan's future while boxing me out. I sent it to their entire contact list, pulled from Vanessa's own marketing database. By nightfall, my phone buzzed with replies. Ellie, I had no idea. We're so sorry. Their perfect image cracked, and the fundraiser? Gone, deleted, as donations vanished. But the twist that hit me hardest, the one that still makes my throat tight, was for Ethan. I couldn't let him grow up believing their version of me. So I recorded another video, this one private, locked, in a cloud account with a password set to unlock when he turns 18. Ethan, I said, my voice soft. I'm your grandma, Ellie. I taught you poems, remember? This is the truth about your parents, about me, about why I gave our house to others. Love is in control, sweet boy. It's letting someone bloom. I hope you'll understand someday. I saved it, knowing Vanessa and Derek could never touch it. They thought they'd written my story, but I was the one holding the pen, and I wasn't done yet. The air outside Clara's office was damp, Seattle's usual drizzle coating the sidewalks. Ruth walked beside me, her arm brushing mine, not saying a word, but offering the kind of quiet that feels like strength. My knee ached, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt steady, like the ground under me wasn't shifting anymore. I'd taken back my life, line by line, and Vanessa and Derek knew it. But they didn't know everything, not yet. That night I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd graded papers and helped Ethan draw stars. My laptop glowed, the video I'd sent to their friends and neighbors already sparking replies. Ellie, this is awful, how could they? I donated to their fundraiser, but I'm pulling it back. Vanessa's carefully curated world was unraveling, and I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. They'd used my name to paint themselves as saints, crowdfunding for Ethan's future, while planning to sell my house out from under me. I wasn't going to let them hide behind that lie. The fundraiser vanished by morning, scrubbed from the internet like a bad dream. Vanessa's next move was predictable. My phone lit up with a Facebook notification, her post dripping with performative hurt. It's heartbreaking when family turns on you, she wrote. We've sacrificed so much to care for Mom, but some people choose bitterness over love. Comments piled up, sad emojis. You're so strong, Vanessa. Sending prayers. I didn't reply. I screenshot every word and sent it to Clara. Subject line, documenting harassment. Then I closed the app. I'd spent enough years teaching kids to rise above drama. Now it was my turn. But the video for Ethan, that was different. It wasn't for the world. It was for him. I recorded it late when the house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the patter of rain outside. I sat in my reading chair, a poetry book on my lap, and spoke to the camera like he was there. Ethan, it's Grandma Ellie. You're 5. Now, probably asleep with that stuffed whale I gave you. I don't know what your parents will tell you about me, but this is the truth. They tried to take my home, my choices, my voice, all while saying it was love. I gave our house to a charity, not to hurt them, but to help others, teachers like me who need a place to belong. Love doesn't control, sweet boy. It lifts you up. When you're 18, you'll see this, and I hope you'll understand why I fought. I saved it to a cloud account, password protected, set to unlock on his birthday in 2038. Vanessa and Derek could never touch it. It was my gift to him, a truth they couldn't rewrite. The next day, I stood at the post office, mailing the trust documents to the charity. The clerk, a young woman with a nose ring, slid the receipt across. "Big day?" she asked. I smiled. The biggest. I'd signed my house over not out of anger, but purpose. It would be a haven for retired teachers, a place for poetry, readings, coffee mornings, maybe even a garden like mine. I could still live there until I was ready to move, but it was safe, locked in stone, beyond Vanessa's reach. Then the storm hit. Vanessa's voicemails came first, sharp and frantic. "Mom, what is this? You sent that video to everyone? You're humiliating us." The second one was colder. "This isn't you. You're acting like we're the enemy after all we've done." Derek texted, his words clipped. "This is extreme, Ellie. We need to talk, not play games." I didn't answer. I let the messages sit, like papers I'd graded and set aside. Instead, I brewed chamomile tea and opened a book of Mary Oliver poems, letting her words wash over me. You do not have to be good. I didn't have to be their version of good anymore. They showed up unannounced the next morning, banging on my door. I peeked through the curtain. Vanessa's hair was messy, her eyes red. Derek stood behind her, arms crossed, like a man who'd lost a deal. I opened the door halfway. "Say what you need to," I said, my voice calm. Vanessa's words tumbled. "Out." "Why didn't you just talk to us? We were helping you, Mom. Now everyone thinks we're monsters." I looked at her, the girl I'd raised, and saw someone I didn't know. "You left me alone for surgery," I said. "You took my money, my house, my voice. You called it help. I call it theft." Derek stepped forward. "Let's fix this as a family, Ellie. No lawyers, no videos." I shook my head. "We'll talk, but at Clara's office. Neutral ground." Vanessa's face hardened. "You're making a mistake." I closed the door, my heart pounding but not breaking. They wanted me to back down, to smooth things over like I always had. But I was done smoothing. That evening, I checked my bank account, now mine alone. A charge caught my eye. $180 at a boutique, dated last week, after I'd confronted them. Vanessa's name was still on the card. They hadn't stopped, even after the meeting. I forwarded it to Clara, my fingers steady. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be a reckoning. They walked into Clara's office the next day, like they were stepping into a trap. Vanessa's smile was tight, Derek's jaw set. I sat with Ruth and Clara, my folder of evidence ready. "You used my card again," I said, sliding the receipt across. "After everything." Vanessa's voice was low, almost a hiss. "You're tearing us apart, Mom. For what? To prove a point?" I met her eyes. "To prove I'm still here." Clara took over. "The trust is final. The house is protected. Any further actions will be fraud." Vanessa's hands shook. "You'll be alone, Mom. Is that what you want?" I leaned forward, my voice soft but clear. "If alone means free, then yes." I stood, not rushed, just done. They didn't try to stop me. For the first time, I walked away feeling whole. The days after that meeting felt like the quiet after a storm. The house didn't creak as much, or maybe I just noticed it less. I was 62, with a knee that still grumbled, but I wasn't carrying the weight of Vanessa's plans anymore. I'd taken back my life, and it felt like slipping into an old favorite sweater, worn but mine. I started small the way you do when you're finding your footing. I went back to my garden where the tulips had taken a beating from the Seattle rain. I knelt in the dirt, my hands sinking into the cool earth, planting a new batch of bulbs, late bloomers called Midnight Fire. They wouldn't flower until spring, but I liked that. Some things take time to show their beauty, just like people. I'd learned that the hard way. My body was healing too. At my next doctor's visit, the orthopedic surgeon raised an eyebrow at my chart. Your mobility's better than I expected, Ellie. Blood pressure's down too. What's changed? I smiled, thinking of the trust papers, the video, the weight I'd let go. Less stress, I said. He chuckled. Keep it up. I walked out of the clinic without a limp, not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't carrying their baggage anymore. Vanessa and Derek didn't fight the trust. Not really. Clara's papers were ironclad and their reputation was crumbling. The video I'd sent had spread. Neighbors whispered, friends unfollowed, and Vanessa's fundraiser was a ghost, its donations refunded or dried up. She posted one last time, a vague plea about family misunderstandings, but the comments weren't kind. Is this the same Ellie you left in the hospital? Someone wrote. I didn't add to the noise. I'd said my piece, and silence was my shield now. They moved out of the house a month later, leaving the keys in a lockbox as I'd asked. I didn't see them go. Ruth drove by to check, texting me. It's empty. You okay? I was. The charity sent a letter thanking me for the house. They plan to turn it into a community hub for retired teachers, workshops, book clubs, a garden where tulips could bloom. I'd stay there until I was ready to downsize, but knowing it was safe, that it would live on for others, felt like a poem I'd finally finished. One evening, I pulled a box from the attic, one Vanessa had, packed during her organizing phase. Inside were things I'd thought lost. Tom's old poetry books, a quilt my mother made, a journal I'd kept when Vanessa was little. I flipped through it, landing on a page from her 5th birthday. She read her first poem today, I'd written. Her voice was so big for such a small girl. My eyes stung, not with anger, but with a quiet grief for what we'd been. I didn't hate Vanessa. I just couldn't let her hold my pen anymore. I found something else that night, tucked in one of Tom's books, a letter he'd written before he passed. Ellie, it began, you're a teacher, not just of words, but of heart. Don't let anyone dim that. You're built for storms. I kissed the paper, folded it gently, and placed it back. He was right. I'd weathered this one, and I was still standing. I started going to a poetry group at the community center, a small room with folding chairs and a kettle that hissed like it was impatient. The women there, some widowed, some just tired of being invisible, listened when I shared. I didn't know I was fading, I told them one night, my voice soft. They called it care, but it was a slow erasure. Heads nodded, no one interrupted. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, the kind that says, I've been there too. I left each meeting a little lighter, like I'd left pieces of the hurt behind. A neighbor stopped me one day, her voice low over the garden fence. I heard about Vanessa, she said. You did what I couldn't with my own kids. Good for you. I smiled, clipping a tulip stem. I just remembered I had a voice. She grinned, and I realized I wasn't alone. Not really. Then came the news about Ethan. A text from Vanessa, short and cold. He's starting school. Thought you'd want to know. No mention of me seeing him, no softening. I read it twice, then set my phone down. I didn't cry. I thought of the video waiting for him, locked away for 13 years. He'd know me, not as the grandma they painted, but as Ellie, who fought for what was right. That was enough. I sat on my porch one morning, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the tulips catching the light. At 62, I'd learned something I wish I'd known sooner. Love doesn't mean letting people take pieces of you. It's giving, sure, but it's also standing tall, saying, "This is who I am." For those of you over 50, listening, hear this. You're not done. Not your heart, not your dreams, not your voice. You can start again, not with anger, but with truth. Find your people, the ones who listen, who see you. They're out there, waiting. I looked at my garden, the midnight fire bulbs hidden under the soil, waiting for spring. I didn't need Vanessa's approval or Derek's plans. I had roots, deep and strong, and they were mine. The world was still, turning, and I was right where I belonged. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering about Ethan, picturing him at school, his curls bouncing as he ran across the playground. I hoped he'd find poetry someday, the way I had, words that could hold him when the world felt heavy. I didn't know if I'd see him again, and that hurt, a quiet ache, like a bruise you only notice when you press it. But I'd given him something. Vanessa and Derek couldn't take away, a truce, waiting for him in that video, locked safe until he was ready. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about planting a seed for his future. A few weeks later, I got a call from the community center. "Ellie, we're starting a poetry workshop," the organizer said. "You in?" I said yes before I could overthink it. The first session, I brought one of Tom's old books, shared a line from Whitman. "I am large, I contain multitudes." We laughed, sipped tea, and talked about life, not as teachers or mothers, but as women who'd weathered storms. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that, being seen, not as someone's mom or burden, but as Ellie, with stories and dreams of my own. The charity sent updates, too. They'd named the house Whitaker Haven, a nod to me, though I hadn't asked for it. They planned a library corner, shelves for poetry and novels, a place where teachers could sit and breathe. I visited one day, walking through the rooms where Vanessa had grown up, where I'd read to Ethan. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like legacy, like I'd turned pain into something that could grow. Vanessa and Derek faded from my life, there, texts and calls stopping as the reality sank in. I heard through Ruth that they'd moved to a smaller place, their social circle quieter now. I didn't wish them harm. I just wished them accountability, the kind that makes you look in the mirror and see the truth. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. That wasn't my story to write anymore. One morning I found a package on my porch, no note, just a small box. Inside was a poetry anthology, brand new, with a bookmark on a page by Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. I didn't know who sent it, maybe Ruth, maybe a neighbor who'd seen the video. But it felt like a reminder. I didn't have to carry the hurt forever. I could set it down, step into that field, and keep going. If you're over 50, listening to this, let me tell you something I learned too late. Your life isn't a script someone else gets to write. Not your kids, not your fears, not the years piling up. You're allowed to say no, to choose yourself, to start over. Find the ones who listen, your Ruth, your poetry group, your tulips. They'll remind you who you are when the world tries to forget. At 62, I'm not done. I'm blooming, late but fierce, like those midnight fire tulips waiting under the soil. I stood in my garden that afternoon, the air sharp with the promise of spring. The bulbs I'd planted were still hidden, but I knew they'd come up, red and gold against the gray. I didn't need Vanessa's apologies or Derek's excuses. I had my roots, my voice, my heart. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.